Welcome, Christine. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Sally. I'm happy to be here.
So, this is, I think, a really important segment, like maybe one of the most important ones that I've ever done. The one that we get the most attention for is always how do I get into the Ivies? But honestly, much more important is this one, which is all about running your own race, how to tune out the noise and find your best fit college. So I just can't stress this enough. Like I want to quote an email that I was sent to me, and it's by Jennifer Wallace,
Mm-hmm.
who is an author. And she was interviewing John Pryor, who's a researcher on education. And she starts by saying, as the parent of a high school senior, I have a front row seat to this year's college admissions season, which the Wall Street Journal calls the most chaotic, confusing college admissions season in years. New York Magazine called it the craziest one in years. There's been huge increases in applications, and students are really suffering as a result in terms of anxiety. And so I just wanted to bring that up to kind of explain to people why this is so important.
Mm-hmm.
So like with that kind of dire, I think the good news is that we actually have some suggestions of how to deal with this and make it better,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not all of it. We can't help with the financial aid chaos, but we can
It's
help
only
with
so
the,
much
yeah,
we
there's
can do.
only so much we can do. But so let's kind of back up now and let's discuss what we mean when we talk about fit and why fit is actually important.
Yeah, and I think this is a word that gets thrown around a lot with regard to the college search process or life after high school. And I think thinking about it in that context of life after high school is a bit of a calmer way to
Hmm.
do that. Because when I think about it and we're talking about what's the best fit college for you? Well, first of all, let's take a step back. Is college right for you? What are you thinking for your life after high school? What do you envision for your life when you graduate high school? Have you liked learning in the academic setting like this? Do you enjoy working with your hands? Are costs of undergraduate college a really important factor in your search process because you know you want to become a doctor and med school's super long and super expensive, and so you can't use all of your funding on the undergrad level. So I think when we talk about fit, we kind of have to take this macro level view first and saying, what's the right fit for your student? Because each student is going to have something different. And a lot of the times, especially I think at high schools that have a bit of an achievement culture where it's very common for students to go to four-year colleges upon graduation, um, it they you could get caught up in the race and forget why you're running. And
Hmm.
I think it's helpful to take a pause and sort of say, like, hang on, why are we doing this?
Hmm.
What's going on here? What do you think? And what do you envision in terms of your life after high school? And then let's find the right fit for you because it could be a lot of different pathways.
Hmm. Hmm. So let's actually talk, like, what are some of the different pathways? Like, what are options for students other than college? What do you do if you don't go to college after high school?
So many things. You could
Yeah.
enter the workforce.
Hmm.
There are tons of apprenticeship programs that are sponsored by each state. So you can go on your state's website and just literally do an internet search on apprenticeships in the name of your state and see if what fields are uh, hiring and kind of like teaching you as you go, because apprenticeships are awesome in the sense that you get to work with your hands, you get to learn as you go. Um, for some students, it could be the community college pathway,
Hmm.
whether it's for financial reasons, for socio-emotional reasons, you're not quite ready to be away from home and live away from home. Um, or it just makes sense, again, with like your pathway where you say, like, I don't know what I want yet. Why not take my gen ed requirements, sort of these general classes in my first 2 years at community college, and then maybe transfer to a four-year college for a bachelor's degree.
Hmm.
Or I want to be a dental hygienist. I want to be an ultrasound tech. Why don't you go to community college for that, get the associates, and then immediately start working 2 years after high school once you have that degree? So that can be a viable pathway for a lot of students. And then there is the traditional bachelor's degree seeking institution pathway that tends to dominate the media coverage, I think, but in actuality doesn't reflect all of the different choices that students in America have when they think about life after high school.
Yeah, I was talking with a family yesterday where the son, the student, really wanted engineering, but didn't have quite the academic profile that he needed to get in, including in math, which, what he said to me was, it math takes me longer, but I'm really committed. This is a pathway that I want. And so his mom was like, yeah, so I was thinking community college would give him the time. He could take a lower course load. And I said, absolutely. That sounds like exactly the right pathway for you.
And I think
100%. Yeah.
it's really funny because in most other countries, the high school or secondary school experience is very different. You stop focusing on classes you don't enjoy as much, you're not as good at. You start narrowing your content areas. You sit for these tests. These tests determine where you go to college or what you study. And the US is completely different. We're generalists. We're like, you don't
Mm-hmm.
like science? Sorry. Still got to take 2 or 3 years of it to graduate from high school. You don't like
Mm-hmm.
English? Too bad. You got to take 4 years. And
Right.
so we train generalists because we believe in the value of like a broad foundation and building upon that foundation, but that doesn't necessarily connect to pre-professional college degree programs. So it can be a little bit of a mismatch where students say like, I want to be an engineer. I want to do this right now, but
Mm-hmm.
it's okay to sort of say like, listen, take a beat, figure out if this is exactly what you want to do, get a more solid foundation in math so that you can confidently transition to that program and thrive. Because the last thing anyone wants, a college administrator or a student or a parent, is for the student to start at a 4 year program and flounder or fail
Mm-hmm.
out, right? So I think kind of understanding that there are these different pathways and the one that's right for you may not be the same as your neighbor or your best friend, and that's okay, is a really healthy place to start the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I also want to think about it just in terms of, when you talk about achievement culture, it's your life isn't over if you don't get into a name brand college or university. I've worked in the past with a student who looked up the admit rate for every college she applied to. And I said, I really wish you would stop doing that. That has nothing to do with the experience that you're going to have. And I love the examples of NYU and USC, University of Southern California. When I was younger, those schools took everybody who breathed and graduated from high school. I mean, they really, really did, right? And now they've become, the
Hyper
amazing
selective.
place. But the fact is that graduates of those colleges did just fine back when, like, really literally a 2 point, I don't know, 2.5 could get in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a very different experience. And so I try with this student, like, why is this so important to you?
Right. Yeah.
And she's like, well, I worked really hard. Like, well, so have a lot of students. So try not to think instead, like, what should let's dive into that then.
Hmm.
What should they be thinking about
Yeah.
instead of whether they're doing as well or better than the other students in their class?
Hmm.
Like, what should they be thinking about instead?
Yeah. So for students who know that they want to go to a 4 year college, who might be pursuing some of these colleges that have name brand recognition, um, I think the first step is to kind of think through the fact that where you go to college is not a prize you get for winning high school, right?
Mhm.
Because, like you said, a lot of people work really hard. There is
Mhm.
a valedictorian, at least one, could be more than one, at each high school in the
Mhm.
United States. And there are only a certain amount of spots in these, colleges that have the most name recognition, in our society. So not everyone can get in. And
Mhm.
so thinking about this process and refocusing it more on this is the next step in your educational journey and what learning environment do you thrive the best in? I think that's the way to approach it is to sort of say, I get it, you're working really hard, but you don't want to be making decisions just because you think it'll look good on your college application process. Because
Mhm.
wouldn't it stink if you did all this volunteering that you hated and then you still didn't get into schools that you had thought you were eligible for, that's not how you should be living your life, you know? And I think the
Mhm.
pandemic really impact a lot of these current students' experiences and their growth in adolescence. And so I think time is precious. The way we spend our time, who we spend our time with, is really precious and valuable. And focusing on that and living an authentic life or lived experience, um, that should be taken into consideration just as much as you think about, you know, whether or not I should do this activity or take this advanced course because it's what everybody around me is doing.
Mhm. Mhm. Exactly. And it's interesting, I mean, from that same email, that I just mentioned from Jennifer Wallace,
Hmm.
John Pryor, the researcher, did this huge survey data on 22,000 first-year students, and in terms of whether they got into their first, second, or third choice, it looks like only 2% of, like, whether they got into that top choice affected only 2% of their experience as
Yeah,
measured. There was only a 2% difference. That's what I'm
yeah.
trying to say. The students who went to the college and invested themselves in that college, whether it was a top choice or not
Mhm,
initially, were the ones who were successful in terms of their
mhm.
college experience.
Yeah. So spoiler alert, I am a huge fan of Jennifer B. Wallace. I've
Mhm.
been reading her book. She wrote this book, Never Enough: The Culture of Toxic Achievement, and
Mhm.
how we can work against it. And one of the articles, not articles, one of the surveys that she points out in the book talks a little bit more about this and saying that there are kind of like six key traits to a successful college experience, none of which have anything to do with rankings, where it fell on your list, top choice and middle choice, uh, name brand recognition or prestige. The what these factors are things that connect us to other people. They're relationship based. Taking a course with a professor who made learning exciting, having a professor who cared about the student personally, having a mentor who encouraged the student to pursue their goals, working meaningfully across projects, and across semesters, participating in an internship, being active in extracurricular activities. These are things you can accomplish at every college in the
Mm.
US. So the question should then become, which feels like the place I am most likely to connect with the most number of students or the most number of faculty members?
Mhm.
Which place feels like both an academic fit for how I learn best and also a social fit? And
Mhm.
that's really hard because we've sort of trained high school students to just go, 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 go. Like there's this
Mhm.
culture of just like achievement and the grind and, you know, suffer through. We'll do this together. When in
Mhm.
reality, you should be thinking, how do I like to learn?
Mhm.
And I wish that was something that I had considered in my college experience to be like, I really like absorbing information from an expert. I love sitting someplace and just hearing someone who knows what they're talking about educate me. And so
Mhm.
for me, larger class sizes, lecture based um, discussions, that was the right fit for me versus the anxiety I felt when I was in these really small groups of 8 students and feeling
Mhm.
like if I didn't read every exact sentence of the, you know, homework, the professor would know. So I think kind of considering where you can have the most meaningful relationships is a huge part of the fit perspective. And a lot of that comes from visiting colleges or doing as much as you can to learn about them through virtual options.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think cultural fit, like just fit in general, I talk to a lot of parents who say, "Well, my kid's adaptable. He'll be fine anywhere." And I'm like, "I'm sure he will be, but wouldn't you like him to be as happy as he could be?"
Yeah.
You
I
know,
mean, all
like
kids are resilient, but
yeah,
at the same time, I mean, our colleague Mary Sue talked about this where like I think it was her husband when he went to college, like he had a really hard time finding a barber that could cut his style hair. And that
right.
was really challenging. And, or it didn't feel great. And so it's these little things you don't think about that really do impact your everyday experience, um, that I think become a bigger part of the college process than students are necessarily thinking about when at this stage they're like, what do I have to do to get in? It should be the reverse. It should be like, where do my skills and what I'm interested in align best? What are a handful of schools that are a good fit in that? perspective for me.
Yeah. And then that way, if you're thinking about that, if someone's like, why would you be applying there? You can say, because it looks like a great fit for me.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think it's pretty hard for them to argue because you're just
Mm-hmm.
saying, for me, that's the best fit. So we have just a few minutes left. So how can parents help with this? I think that's really like if we could give some specific,
Yeah.
advice about, because I talk to parents all the time who honestly, like some parents participate in the toxic achievement culture and hopefully, they can learn that it's not so important. But for those that don't, how can they help their student who might be at one of these high schools?
I think the vast majority of parents are nowhere near trying to contribute to this toxic achievement
Hmm.
culture. I think it's something that has just developed over time in our society because life has become more expensive. It's
Hmm.
more expensive to live. It's more expensive to work. In previous generations, it was more common for children to surpass their parents' income, and there were safety nets, in place from the government if you didn't want to go to college after high school and wanted to go and become a mailman, whatever. Um,
Hmm.
so that's changed, and so what I think we need to recognize first and foremost that parents are just trying to do right by their kids. They're
Hmm.
trying to love their kids, and sometimes that can be shaded by some of the teenage angst that happens when you're growing and changing so rapidly in those 4 years of high school. And so, one thing I would say is shower your kid with love. Everything I've been like reading and listening to is just like your child needs to know that their worth isn't tied to their achievement. And oftentimes, even if you're not trying to impact that, asking questions like you're just trying to connect with your kid. How is school? Or how is that test you had? That's the one thing you know about their day, and you're trying to get them out of their shell to talk to you. The teenager might hear like this is the only thing they care about. We're
Hmm.
focusing on academics. So start with lunch. How was lunch? Or
Hmm.
don't even ask about school when they first come home and let them come to you later in the day to just sort of talk through things. So love on them, let them know that they can ask you questions and that you will love them no matter what comes of these college outcomes.
Hmm.
Uh,
And you won't be disappointed. You'll celebrate the path that they
yes,
took to get there. I think
yes.
that's so important.
And that's where reining in some of your bias can be helpful. If you go to a college campus and you're like, well, I don't like this place. It's not for me. Try and keep it together and like first assess what your student thought so that you don't unintentionally bias them by saying like, oh, that place was a dump. And then the
Hmm.
student's like, oh, okay, I didn't
Right.
think so. So
Yeah.
kind of let the student lead the conversation.
Yeah. All right. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but thank you so much for being on the show, Christine.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
All right. So thank you also to Beth Feinberg Keenan and Karen Spencer. And be sure to join us next week to find out what is meant by a liberal arts education and a polytechnic institute. It may not be what you think. In addition, our finance expert will be discussing what loud budgeting is. So I think that's going to be good. And finally, I want to remind you that you don't have to listen to our shows live. Every show is accessible 24/7 on the Voice America website. And you can also download every show for free on Amazon Music or iTunes. And if you're curious about other topics, remember to look through our archives. You can find them along with our blog posts on blog.getintocollege.com. Don't forget, we're here every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific.